Hello. So in this writing notes video, we're going to talk about section breaks and subsection breaks. What they are, what they do, why you might want to use them, and when you would want to avoid them. So section breaks are basically ways that you divide up a paper into different components, different portions of the paper that are focused on specific large-scale concerns. So section breaks usually indicate some sort of major transition in a paper from one big idea or portion of a paper to another. Visually, they're very straightforward usually. But there's a number of approaches that you can take. And Microsoft Word actually, if you compose in Microsoft Word, they actually have section heading format with different sort of levels of section heading if you want to use that. Personally, I don't use it, but you could use it if you want to. It's there and it's an option. But typically what you would do to indicate a section break, you want a section heading, so a title that tells us what that section is going to do. And then usually it's either you skip a line, you have a paragraph break, then the section heading may be centered. Sometimes people will bold it, sometimes people will italicize it, sometimes people will put it in one size font bigger than the rest of the text. Like if you're writing in Times New Roman 12, you might put it in Times New Roman 14. Sometimes people will put it in a different font. And if you do that, you want to choose a font that is the opposite style of what you're writing the body of the text in. So if you're writing in a serif font like Times New Roman, you would want your section headings in a sans serif font like Arial, or vice versa. But you want, typically section breaks will be centered, not always. They will sometimes be flush with the left-hand margin. But you want the section break to be visually distinct so that if you were just scanning down a page, you would be able to identify it immediately. Now, why do this? Why have section breaks? Well, there's a couple of major reasons. One is that sometimes particular types of writing or particular forms will just require it. So typically in like strict official APA format, where you would be writing up, say, a description of an experiment or something like this, a report on an experiment, you would typically have distinct sections that you need to include. Now that's not like APA citations, that's like what actual psychologists do when they're writing up experiments. So you would have things like a methodology section, you would have things like a results section, conclusions, data, whatever it is. I don't know APA that well, so but you get my point here. Is each of these pieces of the writing has a distinct purpose. Now, in a less sort of formalized approach, you still get the same kind of thing. Section headings do the same type of work. So, for instance, when I write a scholarly essay for my own discipline of English, when I write about a play, for instance, I will put section headings into that essay to mark transitions between big ideas. So that's, again, what you want section headings to do, is broad concepts that are developed over multiple paragraphs, where you're elaborating on a particular point or a particular issue, idea, concern, whatever it is. You want to put that into its own section to make that coherent, because that's essentially what section and subsection breaks do, is they create coherence around a particular section. In principle, a section or a subsection should stand on its own, making its own mini argument that fits within the larger framework of the argument, the overall argument that you're making. So why might you not want to use section breaks? Well, in my experience, one of the issues that especially emerging writers, student writers often run into with section breaks is wanting to use too many of them. I've seen papers where almost every paragraph gets its own section break. That's too much. It's not useful at that stage, because what section breaks are meant to do is, again, create coherent subsections of papers so that readers can figure out what's going on. If every paragraph is getting its own subheading, or every other paragraph is getting its own subheading, chances are there's not enough information in those sections that they really need to stand alone. So that's one of the potential problems with section breaks or subsection breaks, is just the potential problem of overusing them. Because one of the risks with section breaks is that they slow a reader down, because they're a more definite stop between paragraphs. A reader is more likely to slow down, and so it breaks up the rhythm of reading. The other issue with section breaks, my mind has just gone blank. Give me a second to think of it. The other issue with section breaks is that sometimes writers will attempt to use them in lieu of transitions, which you definitely don't want to do. This is a big risk because it intuitively seems like a section break is a division. And it is. That's its purpose. It divides one portion of the paper from another. But you still need a transition. You still need some way of connecting those two ideas. And again, this is a thing that I've seen writers do, especially student writers, is that they will come to the end of one idea, they will put a section break, and then they will just start with something completely different, completely unrelated. And that's not what section breaks, section headings are meant to do. They don't take the place of a transition. You still need to let it be clear to the reader how the ideas before the section break connect with the ideas after. So this still needs to be clear. But again, section breaks are a way of organizing the information in your paper, structuring it in such a way that it's easier for readers to follow. But you still want the paper to be coherent as a whole, and you still want it to flow properly.